I feel like it's my responsibility to come on here and say things like this. Hi, welcome back to the channel. Today I want to talk to you about what spiritual gifts are and how you can use them. Now, I made a video recently on spiritual gifts, and I was grateful because I received some feedback from some of the subscribers and the people that watch this channel. And I learned that there are specific verses in the Bible about this. So I kind of went on a big research binge watching videos and went down a big rabbit hole of all the different things that people say about different ideas. And in First Corinthians, it talks about, the letter that Paul writes. He talks about the gifts of the Spirit. And he talks about knowledge and wisdom, and there's faith, and there's healing, and there's also tongues and the interpretation of tongues. And as I went farther and farther along through this process, I began to realize that when I'm talking about the gifts of the Spirit, I'm talking about the gifts that I personally received in my life as a result of a spiritual practice and a spiritual discipline. Now, part of that spiritual discipline for me was through Christianity as well, specifically through Matthew 5-7 and other areas of the Bible too. And they're really, really important to me. And I believe that there are as many opinions about the Bible and about the spiritual gifts and about any of those things as there are people. So, I'm careful because when I started doing this research, I really started to listen to, because that's a big thing about today for me in my journey, in the way that I live my life, is when someone presents something to me that I don't necessarily understand or agree with, I still have the capacity to go explore. And I'm grateful that I did, because I learned a lot of things. And I know in my life, without a doubt, hands down, I've received the spiritual gift of knowledge, the spiritual gift of wisdom, the spiritual gifts of faith. All of those things have happened to me directly as defined by the Christian, by the Bible. But I'll also say this. Now, I was listening to some people talk about the gift of knowledge, for example, and the ability to know what's going on with someone else, right? And even to the point where they're talking about being able to read their minds. It's a huge red flag for me. Now, I will say this. I know that things are possible through God that I don't understand. I know that. And I'm not saying that there maybe isn't a person out there who has that gift given to them in that manner. But to me, I'm skeptical, because my personal experience tells me that I used to believe that I could read people's minds. Now, I didn't walk around telling people like, oh yeah, I'm a mind reader. But when I would listen to my thinking and pay attention to what my specific thoughts were in situations, I realized that my mind loved to say things like, oh, that person's thinking this and this and that. Oh, that person's thinking that and this. They weren't talking. This is just me looking at them and what my mind is doing. And it occurred to me one day, wait a minute, I don't actually know what that person is thinking. I don't know what that person's thinking, because I don't have the gift of telepathy, or it's not rational. It's not rational. It's so commonplace too. I was in college after I had my awakening, and I was taking an art appreciation course. It was a great course. I learned a lot about art, things that I never knew about. And the professor, at one point, you ever had one of those times when you say something and you wish you could just take it back after it came out of your mouth? So I'm sitting in this course, and I think I was around 38 at the time, and most of the students were younger, 19, 20, in that area, the college age kids. And the professor asked, she was talking about a specific piece of art that a person had done back in, it wasn't that long ago, but it had to do with the Chinese uh, dynasties. And it was kind of a protest. And there was a lot, he broke a lot of things. And anyway, that's not the point. She asked the class out loud, she said, "What do you think this artist was thinking when they made this piece?" And I said out loud in front of everybody who was quiet in the room, I said, "How do I know what he's thinking?" And she stopped and she said, "Robert, would you like to elaborate?" And I said, "Oh my, I don't know what he's thinking because I can't know what he's thinking. I can guess," which is what she was actually looking for. She wanted an assumption. She wanted me to kind of get an idea based on his actions, what his art looked like, the things that were going on in his life, and guess. But it's a guess. It's not like real life because I will never know what that person was thinking unless he specifically tells me what he's thinking. And the reason I'm so passionate about that is because I was crazy. I was crazy. Big time. And one of the gifts that God gave me was that I recognize that. So if I want to look at that in the Christian way, I can say he gave me wisdom to know that it's not possible for me to know what someone else is thinking. And like I said, maybe there are some people that can do that, but most people just walk around thinking they know what other people are thinking. And I don't know if you watching this video do that, but I'm sure you've encountered people that do that. Why is that important? Well, let's talk about creating an awesome life right now. Let's talk about being able to live a better life, a life you really like, a life that has awesome people in it, a life where you feel good about who you are and feel good about your friends and whatever. You can't live a good life that way when you're walking around telling yourself stories about what is going on in other people's heads. It's not possible. Well, I mean, I suppose it could be possible, but if you're neurotic, even a little bit, that story becomes super negative and it becomes very limiting because there might be an opportunity. Let's say there's someone that has something that you want, or they're teaching something, they have something that they could teach you, but you don't ask them because the mind says, well, they probably think this, and that, and the other thing, and blah, blah, blah. And you shut yourself down. Shut yourself down. And to me, that thing about reading minds alone is the devil's work. That's the devil's work. That has nothing to do with what God is trying to do in this world. I can't read people's minds. And that is one of the reasons I made that previous video, is that there's people out there giving horrible advice on the internet. Horrible, horrible advice. And I feel like it's my responsibility to come on here and say things like this. Will it gain a lot of traction? No. Will I have a lot of people that say a bunch of things? Yes. That's fine. I don't care. And this is where I drive religious people crazy. I believe God approves of what I am doing. I do. God led me here to make this video today and talk to people that I really care about. I've never met you. It doesn't matter. I care about you. And if I can even just plant a seed in someone's mind to allow them to take a look at themselves and consider things that may not be going so well, things that ultimately that they can change to create a better life, then I've done my work here, and I'll continue to try. So to me, the gifts of the Spirit, the spiritual gifts that I receive, because I do receive knowledge, I do receive wisdom. Here, I'll go on a little longer. So with wisdom, what I find is that when the universe or God is communicating with me, the things that come into my mind sound very, very different than what my normal thinking sounds like. In a previous version of myself, when I was really bitter and angry and hostile, and I had no God in my life, I had nothing. I was just angry and bitter and alone and frustrated. When I had that, I remember that a situation happened with a friend, someone that I cared about. They said something that I took very personally, and I got really mad. And now, I didn't get mad and start yelling at them. I said, oh, okay. And I walked away and then proceeded to have that conversation in my head with them. You know, the one where I get to win the argument. And I'm saying this and that, and I'm mad, and look at how right I am, and look at how wrong they are. And here comes God into my thinking, into my thoughts, and it comes clear as day, can't miss it. Have you tried loving them? Have you tried loving them? And it kind of stopped me for a second, and it was like, whoa, what was that? And the answer was, in that moment, in my anger, my resentment, my hostility, I was not trying to love that person. I was trying to have win an imaginary fight I was having with them. That's not love. And it was times like that, and there's many times in my life that things like that have happened, where I've received a divinely inspired piece of information that I've taken action on. I took action on it. And I decided to have that hard talk, not with the other person, but with myself. Why am I so upset? Why does this bother me so much? Is me being right now more important than my friendship or relationship with this other person? Is it really? Because if it is, that's not a good way to live. My needs are not the most important thing in the world anymore. The needs of others are important too. Anyway, these are some of the things that I've come to understand over the course of the time that I've been practicing this spiritual journey. So, if you do want to learn more about spiritual gifts, though, from the Christian perspective, Derek Prince. That's my highest recommendation. Derek Prince's stuff is really good. I really like it. It's clear and concise. For example, the difference between the word of knowledge and the word of wisdom is that the word of knowledge identifies a problem, where the word of wisdom solves that problem. And not everybody has the same gifts, and you never know when you may or may not receive them. So it's not something that we can do that it just happens. But am I in tune enough with God, with myself, to be able to identify when it's happening and take action on that piece of information? That's what is the most critically important thing to me. Do I listen to, some people call it my intuition, but to me, it's God talking to me, telling me things that I need to do. Do I take action? Do I try loving them?